morning again. This is chapter 7. Sadie's like, what? Good morning. Um, I kind of am thinking this book is only about death. Kind of freaky, but oh well. Hey, I texted with a student last night, and this person has yet to go pick up their Chromebook. My parents work, blah, blah, blah. Again, nothing but excuses. I know your friends are talking either on games, Snapchat, whatever. There's no excuse for you not to have a Chromebook. There's no excuse for you not doing your work. There's no excuse. There's none. I have seventh grade teachers. We had a meeting yesterday that are asking about students. And I said, you'll see what their grades are. And I get to attach notes to every single one in my ELD group, my homeroom, and my math group. So I am going to be honest because my name is attached to you. Um, and sadly, if your parents aren't participating, we've talked about this all school year. You got to pick up the slack. And I don't mean to down talk parents, but like I said, in my own experience, my parents never talked about school, never. And I text with the student for an hour yesterday, back and forth, just about anything. So there's no reason for you not to participate and do your stuff because it's not a lot. I tried to do my first Google Meet yesterday. Obviously, I screwed up. So thank you for those kids that helped me through it. Thursday, I have one scheduled 10:30 to 11, I think, for homeroom, and then 11 to 11:30 for math. So some of you will be doing two of them. Also, it won't last for 30 minutes. I just want to see faces, talk to you, catch up, whatever we need to do. Okay. Um, and not just me. So you guys know there's teachers like Miss Sonia came to school yesterday specifically to help Montserrat get a book or books that she wanted. So Epic, use Epic. Okay. I'm going to be checking minutes and everything else. All right. I promise I'm trying to keep these 30 minutes or less. All right. The next story is Beneath the Surface. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Let's get this party started. They all fell into the water when the boat went over. But Jonah was the only one who woke up in the hospital that night. He heard the doctors talking about him when they thought he was asleep. He ought to be dead too. That long under the water, it's some kind of miracle. They didn't show him his parents, and they couldn't show him his brother. They never found him. Now his aunt and uncle did their best, but they're deadened by grief, and they never wanted children of their own. And it shows. Jonah's room, so his parents are dead, so now his aunt and uncle have taken guardianship of him. And they never wanted kids, so it's kind of like, what are we going to do with them? Jonah's room in their house used to be the spare bedroom, and that shows too. It's as if he's just another guest expected not to outstay his welcome. He tries his best not to get in the way. He helps out with chores. He does his homework quietly in his room. He reads a lot. Sometimes they all watch television together, comedies mostly. They like canned laughter on the soundtrack to remind them when they're meant to laugh. So, like if you're watching a TV show and then all of a sudden you hear people laughing in the background, that's taped laughter to make the viewer know, oh, that's supposed to be funny. It's too easy to forget otherwise. They don't talk about Jonah's mom and dad or his brother. They sleepwalk from day to day. No one seems to notice. Life, or at least something superficially resembling it, goes on. One day, Jonah is walking home from school along the towpath by the river. He goes this way fairly often, and some of the people who live on the houseboats recognize him and give him a wave and a smile. He comes to a bend in the river, so like a little turn in the river, where there are no boats, and he's alone on the path when he thinks he sees something move in the water. He goes over closer to the edge and gazes down. It looks as if the mud at the bottom has been disturbed. It's swirling about in a billowing gray cloud. It it's swirling around the water in billowing gray clouds that are just beginning to settle. And he sees that fish are swimming away from there, but he can't see what's kicked the mud into motion to begin with. He stares puzzled for a minute, then turns to go, but slips on the bank, falls onto his front, and his feet slide down the grassy slope into the water. His legs are submerged as far as his knees before he grabs hold of a mooring post and brings himself to a stop. So then he's lying there feeling foolish and pulling himself back up out of the water, and the wet material of his trousers is clinging to his legs when something brushes against his foot. A fish or some weed, he supposes, just glancing against him, but enough to make him jump. He scrambles up the bank a little way and turns to look at the water, his arms clutching his wet knees beneath his chin. So he's kind of like cradled. The clouds of mud he stirred up settle. The rippled surface of the water flattens and everything goes still. And now he's wet, flustered, and embarrassed, as a couple of older girls from his school pass by, giggling. He runs home and races upstairs to change his clothes before his aunt and uncle can see him. Later, they have dinner and make the usual polite chit chat. His uncle's day at work was fine. His aunt's was fine. Jonah's day at school was fine. He doesn't even consider, that makes me think when you ask a kid, oh, how's your day? Fine. What'd you learn? Nothing. What'd you do? Nothing. Who'd you hang out with? Nobody. Flashbacks. He doesn't even consider telling them about what happened at the river. He's almost forgotten about it all about it himself. Then one day in the following week, it rains during the morning, and when Jonah sets off back home, the roads and pavement are still wet. He cuts through the old shopping area where Barker's, the newsstand, there isn't a positive because you say, who's Barker's? Or what's Barker's, comma, an old newsstand, comma. So that's letting the reader know what Barker's is or was. Newsstand is where they used to put newspapers, and you would go there to buy your newspapers or your magazines. When he was young, he and his brother would buy sweets there when they were visiting. There are puddles scattered around the parking lot. In one corner, the paving slabs are cracked and tilted, forming a mini lake of rainwater. Rather than detour around it, Jonah decides to jump it. He takes a running leap, and as he passes over the puddle, he catches sight of his reflection in the water. Only it isn't him. It's someone else's face that he sees there, pale and blank, looking up at him with wide eyes. It's his brother, his dead brother, staring up at him out of the gray puddle of water in a rundown shopping mall. Jonah lands badly, falling painfully to his hands and knees, feels his lungs empty. When he gets up, he doesn't look back at the puddle. He walks away quickly and runs home. Everyone has had a fine day, and his aunt and uncle notice his grazed palms. After they've eaten and Jonah has done his homework, they watch a film on television and laugh in all the places where it seems like they ought to. Isn't it funny? They notice his palms, but they never ask him about it. The next day, Jonah tells his aunt and uncle that he's feeling ill and can't go to school. They don't ask questions except to check that he'll be all right, left alone all day while they're at work. There's a subtle implication that, if needed, one of them will take the day off to be with him. But there's a much less subtle hint that they'd rather not to. Jonah says he'll be fine on his own, says he'll just read in bed and get some rest. And so off to work they go. And guess what he does while they're gone? You probably guessed right. Then Jonah plays computer games all day. You think he texted his teacher for homework? Emailed his teacher? With the sound on, he ignores the rain against the window. A wet weekend passes in a similar fashion. Jonah's aunt and uncle make suggestions for trips out, but he says he's happy to stay in just to be on the safe side, because remember, he's supposed to be sick. even though he feels much better and they're happy to accept this and do their own thing without him. Monday is sunny and dry, and Jonah declares that he has made a full recovery. School is fine. He gets the bus home for a change, even though walking would probably be quicker. He sits on the top deck near the back playing games on his phone and misses his stop. Well, there's a shocker. When he gets off at the next one, it's starting to rain again, even though the forecast on the radio in the morning had said dry all day. It's one of those sudden showers, the kind that goes from nothing to a downpour in a second. The pavement is instantly awash, one vast puddle turned into chaos by the torrent of rain. Jonah runs homeward, eyes ahead, ignoring fractured reflection beneath him. The street is almost empty of other pedestrians, though it's hard to see for sure through the dense curtain of rain. He turns a corner and comes to a sudden halt. Directly ahead of him, there's a kind of shadow in the falling rain. Only it's not a shadow, it's more of an absence. The hard, straight lines of rain are broken. So the rain's coming down, but it's like if there was an object there, the rain won't go down in front of it. It has, because there's something there, so the rain falls around it. Kind of like an umbrella, it can't penetrate through the umbrella. The hard, straight lines of rain are broken, as if hitting something invisible. It's hard to make out exactly what, but it's a little shorter than Jonah and roughly the shape of a boy. Joe? He says and shivers. He hasn't spoken his brother's name since he died, and the taste of it. Sorry, Sadie's got to lay at my feet. And the taste of it on his lips is now bittersweet. He lifts a hand up slowly. He lifts a hand up slowly, reaches forward toward the apparition, trembling and expectant. The kid on the kid on the skateboard is a bit younger than Jonah and going too fast to do anything about it when he rounds a corner and finds himself headed straight toward Jonah's back. Jonah doesn't hear him coming, only feels the impact. Bam! He's thrown forward, arms splayed like the frantic wings, and lands heavily on the wet paving slabs, adding fresh grazes to his palms. The boy lands on top of him and knocks the wind out of him. He mumbles something that might either be an apology or swearing, and then he's back on the skateboard and speeding away just as reckless as before. When Jonah gets up, there's no gap in the rain anymore, just a relentless torrent. Stair rods, as his dad used to say. Some of his books have spilled out of his school bag. He should gather them up before they're ruined, but he's too distracted. He's thinking about stair rods and he doesn't know what he's feeling. At home, everything has been fine for everyone except for the weather. Jonah doesn't feel like trying to laugh at the TV, so he goes up early to his room to do homework and read. With headphones on and the music turned up loud, concentrating hard on his book, he barely notices the sound of the rain on the window. He doesn't hear the knock on the door at all. His uncle appears behind it as it swings open. We're just nipping out. I guess his hair. We're just nipping out, which I think means going out for a minute. We're just nipping out. Jenny calls and we're off around it to hers. Sorry, let me start that over. We're just nipping out. Jenny called and we're off around to hers for a while. Do you want to come? So the neighbors must have called and said, hey, you want to come over? So dipping out means we're going to go hang out with their friends for a little bit. Jenny is a woman a couple of streets away. Jonah is scared of her gigantic dog and her strangely immobile hairstyle. Immobile means it doesn't move. He says he's happy just to stay in and carry on reading. Uncle John seems perfectly happy with this too. They've been gone almost an hour when the lights go out. Jonah peeps out of the window and sees that the street lights and the lights in the other houses are still on. He knows there's some kind of fuse box in the basement. The lights had gone out once before a couple of weeks earlier, and Auntie Jane had gone down to reset the switch. Jonah uses his phone to light his way safely downstairs. gets a proper flashlight from a drawer in his kitchen, and then opens the door to the basement. He's only been down there once before, when he first moved in. He brought along more stuff than could fit into his room, and so some of it had gone down to the basement temporarily. The stairs down the narrow and creaky. The stairs down are narrow and creaky, and there's no banister, just a slightly wobbly handrail running down the wall. So the other side is open, with the potential for a longish drop if you misstep near the top. It isn't much of a worry when you can see wherever you're going, but somehow in the darkness it seems much more of a danger. Jonah keeps the flashlight trained studiously on the steps beneath his feet and edges down slowly. When he gets to the bottom step, he notices something strange. The pool of light at the end of the flashlight beam has ripples in it. Standing still, he tracks the flashlight over the floor of the basement. It is entirely covered in water. He flicks the flashlight beam up to the back wall. Right near the top, there's a small barred window. So the little window has bars on it. It's been broken for years. The result of a mishap with a cricket ball that Joe and Jonah had each claimed was the other's fault. Kind of like, I didn't do it, he did it. I didn't do it, he did it. Cracked and holed and letting in torrents of rainwater directly onto the fuse box. So he went down into the basement. So it's like below the normal house. The people on the East Coast have those like for tornadoes and hurricanes or whatever. And at the floor level is a window. And so the water's just rushing in. Normally our water would rush to the street. His is rushing, that house is rushing into the bottom of the basement. It takes Jonah a moment to realize what happened. The river runs through the meadow behind the house. It must have burst its banks like a canal bank, flooding the garden and then leaking into the basement. He points the light around the room, piecing together the full scene from the fragments freed from darkness by its beam. The floor is a shallow sea with islands of all the boxes and junk that are kept down there. One of those boxes, one of Jonah's boxes, there's another positive, but this time they're using hyphens, is full of photographs. He decides that before he phones Auntie Jane's cell, he'll get the box full of his past, full of his dead family frozen in life. So pictures out of harm's way. A little more scanning around the flashlight beam finds the particular box in a far corner. Jonah steps down from the bottom step and moves toward the box. But when he steps out, the floor isn't where it ought to be. Though the water can't be more than a few inches deep, his foot drops ankle deep beneath the surface, as if going down one more step on the stairs. Thrown off balance, Jonah lurches forward. His other foot goes forward to steady himself and drops another step. But there isn't another step there. Jonah can see boxes across the room that show with certainty the level of the floor, but his feet are beneath it. He is standing shin deep, so the middle of his calf, in less than an inch of water. It makes no sense at all, but he is puzzled rather than alarmed. Jonah steadies himself as best he can, wobbling and waving his arms. As he does so, the dancing flashlight flits over something else odd happening. In the center of the floor, the water is moving, bulging up in a way water can't do, forming itself in a tiny hill that continues to rise, grow, and shape itself. He steadies the beam of light to watch it, still strangely calm. In a few seconds, a bizarre effigy stands before him. Water in the shape of a boy. The features are unclear. They ripple and change, but he knows it is his brother. He knows it is Joe. The watery figure raises a hand slowly, and Jonah raises his own hand to match it. He looks into his brother's face, his brother made of water, which he looks through the face as much act. He feels something as if he did when he saw the reflection in the puddle, and again when he saw the figure in the rain. It had been fear to begin with, but now it's a sad longing, a slow, long ache of loss. Then this ghost made of water turns and walks slowly away, and with each step, he drops lower in the water, as if the staircase continues on, down below the basement floor. Jonah follows him, sinking deeper into the water with each pace. Can you guess what's going to happen? Can you make a prediction what's going to happen? Because this isn't what I predicted would happen. But now I know. At the apparition's head dips beneath the surface, Jonah laughs, a real laugh. Then, without really thinking about it, he holds his empty breath and steps down and down. Now the water is over his head, and now there is nothing beneath his feet anymore, and he drops slowly down, deeper into the impossible water. He lets go of the flashlight, and it sinks away from him, still shining, twirling away into the distance in darkness. He feels his hands being held, one by soft, slender fingers, one by a larger, rougher hand. Who do you think those hands are? And he laughs again, and water fills his lungs. Somewhere beneath him, the flashlight dies, blinking into nothingness, and Jonah sinks happily into the welcoming dark. I think this is the first story that the death is happiness. I can't wait to read the rest to see how it all ties together. Because a book just about death is crazy. Anyway, the summary of coming back to the round table, and it's written in italics. I guess I should have showed you that at the beginning to show that it's different. That's how I know as a reader it's different. So they all come back to the round table where people are blowing out their candles at the end, and then Mr. Osterly picks somebody new. Jack looks around, and stooping Lee isn't stooping anymore. As he had told this story, he had straightened in his chair. His voice had grown stronger and his narration more assured and fluent, as if the story had filled him with a new confidence. He even raised his head a little. If he's not careful, he might even reveal his eyes from beneath that ragged fringe. But now, with the story ended, he notices the attention of the others and shrinks back again, folds up, packs himself away from their gaze. So that was, like I said, it's not a very, I liked it, says Jack quietly. He doesn't look over at Lee as he says it, and nor does Lee look back when he replies. Thanks, yeah. And he seems to shrivel up even more. Jack can see from their expressions that the others all seem perfectly satisfied by Lee's story and his telling of it, but none of them say anything. Perhaps Jack reasons that perhaps Jack reasons that's just the way Lee prefers it, and he curses himself for having said the little that he did. Thank you, Lee, says Mr. Osterly, and Lee eagerly blows out his candle and pushes his chair away from the table. With 6 of the 13 candles now extinguished, so if you remember the title's 13 chairs, Jack was the 13th chair coming in at the beginning. We've read 6 stories. With 6 of the 13 candles now extinguished, the light from the remaining flames does not extend as far beyond the confines of the table as it did at the start of the evening. The shadows, previously confined to the edges of the room, are creeping in like gathering clouds. Those who have told their stories are withdrawn, are just gray shapes now, almost featureless. Jack can barely make out the wall beyond Mr. Osterly. He wonders whether he would still be able to make out the door if he turned around. And he knows it's silly, but he feels the absence of Lee to his left now. With the story told, there are 4 chairs in a row pushed back around that side now. 4 candles blowing out, 4 dark figures sitting back in the gloom. It feels like a dark hole has opened up there, and that he'll need to take care not to fall into it. For all her strangeness, he's very glad that Amelia is still seated to his right, fidgeting away. The dark gap, so because there's 4 people that have read from the left side and only 2 from the right side. So he's referring to the left side as this gap. The dark gap, I lost where I was. The dark gap reminds Jack, too, that time is running out for him to think of something to say when his own turn comes. But for now, his mind feels like just another dark gap. Perhaps, says Mr. Osterley, as he pauses for a moment that Jack fills with silent panic. Miss Mulligan might tell our next tale this evening. Jack hopes that his relief is not too obvious. Katie Mulligan, with short, serious haircut and her hard eyes, clasped her hands together in front of her on the tabletop. She's rather small, sits up very straight, looking determined and businesslike. Yes, she says, and that apparently is all the introduction she intends to give. That's it for chapter 7. And with all my talking and reading, I can see I'm under 30 minutes. Peace. Check your emails, do the work, ask questions.